It's your girl, VK Johannam, and the V stands for Vidian. Tonight we're going to have an important talk. I am here to force the woke agenda down your throat. That's right, people. By the end of this video, all white viewers will hate themselves for the color of their skin, and all of your kids will be trans. Jokes aside, I don't condone racism towards myself or anybody else. But we're here to talk about closed practices. A closed practice is a spiritual tradition or praxis that is restricted to certain demographics. The most prominent examples are Native American and African spirituality, except for Egyptian paganism. That's an open practice. Basically, if you are white, no Haitian voodooisant is going to teach you voodoo. Now, this sort of brings us to the socio-political concept of cultural appropriation. Now, most people write off the concept of cultural appropriation altogether, and I can hardly blame them, because most of the rhetoric around cultural appropriation in spirituality that you'll see in line is bad and harmful and retarded. Make no mistake, some of the discourse around cultural appropriation and spirituality is just a roundabout way of pressuring white people to apologize for being white, which we should not have to do. If you're white, that does not mean people get to tell you which animals your spirits can appear as, which bones you can use, which plants you can use, etc. The misinformed rhetoric around cultural appropriation and spirituality is often used to justify the harassment and slander of white occult creators, and it can be harmful to white practitioners who are still learning because it can influence them to restrict their education and practice. But bad rhetoric around cultural appropriation is not just harmful to us. A lot of it is liable to spread misinformation around the spiritual beliefs and practices of marginalized people. In fact, I've seen some discourse around cultural appropriation and spirituality that is so fucking misinformed that it accidentally pushes racist stereotypes against marginalized groups. The rhetoric is bad. Make sure you don't learn about cultural appropriation from TikTok. Witch talk, at least, shoot. With this said, I think that closed practices, at least in and of themselves, are not an instance of anti-white racism. Far from it. And I'll explain why. Cultural appropriation, white people, my race, introduced itself to the indigenous and black races pretty abrasively, you could say. We rapidly established ourselves, not all of us, as the primary threat to African and indigenous spirituality. There were forced conversions. In the American colonies, some laws were passed restricting and prohibiting African spirituality because it was seen as being related to rebellion among slaves. We became a threat to the existence of these traditions. In addition to that, we became a threat to their integrity. Practitioners of African and indigenous spirituality were essentially subjected to forced syncretization. For example, the Yoruban religion of Ifa, that's the one that worships Orishas, that religion was forced to mix with Catholicism, creating the religion known as Santeria. Because of us, Ifa had to be watered down and altered from its original form. Now, so white people have always been the primary threat to the integrity and existence of these practices. And unfortunately, we still are. It may be legal for black and indigenous people to practice whatever religion they want, but there are still white Christians telling them that they belong in hell for doing so. And a lot of people of color have been, unfortunately, indoctrinated into saying the same, which is bad. In addition to this, now that these traditions are perfectly legal, white people want to get their hands on them. They want to steal them and bastardize them and sell them for profit. And we're liable to spread a lot of misinformation about them, sometimes also for profit. These practices are closed to protect them from their primary threat, which is us, not all of us. And of course, many of you watching aren't white. And that sucks for you. So, closed practices exist for a very valid reason. I say let black people and the natives have their shit. No reason to steal it or try to self-initiate into it, as far as I can tell. With this said, I will concede that closed practices are a social construct. Many times I have seen practitioners of African American and straight up just African spirituality call on spirits from their closed practices to harm, benefit, or protect white people. I've seen practitioners of Native American spirituality do the same, oftentimes very successfully. If these beings from closed practices can be called on to affect us, then it stands to reason that we would probably be able to work with them effectively if we were given the guidance on how to do so, which we generally have not been. With all that said, this raises the question: is it okay to try and self-initiate into these traditions if you aren't bastardizing them, trying to profit off them, spreading misinformation about them, etc.? Yes, it is within your rights to practice whatever you want. You can do that technically without being part of the problem. Granted, given that you are not going to be able to get the proper guidance on how to approach these beings, I think it's liable to go badly for you. You're increasing the risk of negative spiritual experiences and negative consequences. I'll tell you a story. One time, a client hired me for a curse. I don't sell curse work anymore. But back when I did, one person hired me for it. And for some reason, I felt very guided to call on a spirit from Native American spirituality alongside the spirits that I would normally work with. Now, this is a problem because I was doing this curse for profit. So I thought about it, and I decided to try it. The ritual went fine. Nothing bad happened to me. The results were good, but I'd still profited off a tradition that's very much not my own. So here's what I did. I took every penny that I made by casting that curse and donated all of it to the Native American Heritage Association. Crisis averted. Anyways, that's about all I have to say. Make sure you apologize for being white in the comments, even if you aren't. That'll be funnier. Anyways, that's all for now. Have a great night, and enjoy your immortality.